front, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome you to the 2019 Moderators Meeting. Before we start tonight's meeting, let me welcome all of you and thank the town employees and the elected officials and appointed officials for all the work that you've done. At the table tonight, we have Felicia Hoffman, the town clerk, Nina Pickering Cook, town council. I'm Jim Rapetti, Dave Havlin, assistant town moderator, and Carl Valenti, the acting town administrator. A couple of bookkeeping items. We are going to be using the clickers again. And we had a meeting of citizens this fall. We met 3 times to discuss ways that we might be able to increase the speed of the town meeting. And one of the ideas was to reduce the time for voting. When we first started using the clickers, I believe we were allowing 20 seconds for people to vote, and we had talked about reducing it to 10 seconds.
Yeah, last year we were 15, we can go 10 or 8, whatever.
Okay, so the thought was that 10 seconds is enough time for people to vote. For those who like to vote more than once, who maybe grew up in Boston or Chicago, only your last vote counts. So 10 seconds should be enough to register your vote, and that will help accelerate time. Also, in order to try to move the meeting along a little bit more, in the past we had allowed proponents of a town article or groups that were organized in opposition to a town article 10 minutes to make the presentation. And it was the unanimous opinion of the group of citizens that were studying town meeting that we should reduce that to 8 minutes. The other thing that we're going to be doing is that we will set up 3 microphones in the front of the auditorium. One microphone will be for persons who want to speak in favor of an article. Another microphone will be for those who are opposed to the article. And the third microphone will be for those who have questions, simply have questions, or who want to move the question. And the thought is that by having people queue up, it will help us increase the time that people are able to speak and reduce the time that we spend bringing microphones to individuals. If somebody is unable to come to the microphone, we still will have scouts available who will be able to bring microphones to those who aren't able to come to stand in line. Somebody who's recovering from back surgery, myself, I can certainly understand why people might feel reluctant to come stand in line, so we will have that service available. We will ask speakers from the floor to limit their comments to 2 minutes, which we have done in the past. And Dave Havlin will be the timekeeper, and he'll be gently ringing a bell with 30 seconds left, which will mean you have 30 seconds left, and then 2 rings will mean that you should wrap it up. And the hope is that that will allow more people to have an opportunity to speak, and will also hopefully encourage people to think about what they're going to say ahead of time, because often brevity is the soul of wit. The town meeting in the past, we have had introductory remarks. I will be making introductory remarks primarily dealing with how we conduct ourselves during the meeting, and also some of the things that people should be aware of that might occur during a meeting, such as motions to amend or motions to reconsider a matter that has already been voted on. People often forget that it's not over till it's over. That's just because something has been approved or disapproved by a town meeting doesn't mean that it can't be brought up again for reconsideration by the town. And we saw this in the last few meetings. There have been some articles that were voted one way, and then subsequently the town meeting reversed itself. So very important that people remember that they need to stay until we adjourn the meeting. The warrant committee will be making a presentation at the start of the meeting. Kate and Erica, right? And how long will your presentation be, Erica?
Do you mean the opening remarks?
Right.
1 or 2 minutes?
Okay.
I was thinking I would just thank people, and I wasn't going to give a full presentation.
Okay, so that would be 1 or 2 minutes, and then you'll turn it over to Andy at that point, or do you want to wait until?
For Article 4?
Well, to discuss the general town budget. In the past, did the warrant committee make a general presentation about the town budget?
Yes, Andy's making Article 4 presentation.
Okay, so it'll be the article presentation.
Yes.
It won't be during the general introduction.
Not during the general, it would be the article.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, so then after we have the opening remarks from the warrant committee, John, also, will you want to make a few opening remarks as well? Okay, for the town selectmen. Okay, and then we'll move into really the meat of the meeting. We'll start with a motion that Erica will introduce and will be seconded by Mr. Ursetti, that requires that if somebody makes an amendment that will increase the amount that will be expended, they have to identify the source of the funding for that additional expenditure. And this is an article that we have adopted at every town meeting, at least for the last 30 plus years that I've been here. And it's a way of trying to maintain some fiscal discipline with respect to funding for various items. We'll then move to Article 1, which is simply to act on committee reports. That's usually a pretty perfunctory matter. We'll move through that very quickly. And then we'll move to Article 2, which will be establishing salaries for elected officials. And Ms. Herman will be making the motion, Mr. Hammerly will be seconding. And I'll be reading through the line items for the various salaries, asking if anybody has an objection by voicing a hold. If there are no holds, then the motion will be deemed to have carried. If there,
For some reason, your book doesn't have this.
Yeah.
oh, okay, so we missed that. Okay, what happened?
It does, it's there.
Oh, it is
For
there.
pass it.
Okay,
So you
okay,
just flipped to one page too many.
okay. Well, okay. So we're gonna have 2 Article 2s?
Well, it says to be read before Article 2.
Okay.
So this is just taking action on the consent agenda.
Okay. We don't have to do that as a separate article, Carl?
Well, it is a separate motion,
Okay. Okay.
so, and it can be done at any time. I put it in here, but you do it at the beginning
Right.
of the town meeting.
Okay, so the idea then would, we would have a motion that Articles 6, 7, 12, 13, 14, 20, and 21 would be dismissed.
Right.
And we would move for discussion on that. Now, that was not in the town warrant, but that's okay.
Right, the motion, the articles are all in the warrant, the motions are not.
Right.
The
But-
motion is to move to dismiss them.
But
The
it's
concept
a-
of the
We had talked
consent.
about this preliminarily, but I wasn't sure whether we were going to act on this. The fact that we're combining the motions, the articles, to have a single dismissal is still deemed to be within the scope of the warrant that was sent out to the town citizens.
As long as you're comfortable with that in your discretion as the moderator, yes.
Well, I'm happy to save time.
Yeah, and generally it is done, I've seen it done at the beginning, or it can be done at the end,
Okay.
whichever you
Okay,
think is
well,
more
I think we should
efficient.
do
This
it.
gives immediate hope.
Yeah, right. And it might also encourage people to be brief. Just to know what you're talking about, there are some motions that the intent is to dismiss. And in the past, what we've done is when we would come to each article, we would have a separate motion that would be stated and seconded. Then I would ask for discussion with respect to that particular article, and we would vote to dismiss or not to dismiss. Almost always, the vote is to dismiss. I can't remember anybody ever challenging a vote to dismiss an article. But the thought is that instead of going through 7 separate articles with 7 separate motions, that we would do it with one motion. And my question, when we're conducting town meeting, the motions have to be within the scope of the town warrant, which was sent out to the citizens. So when somebody's making a motion, or when somebody's making a motion to amend a motion that has been made, all of those items, the subject matter has to be within the scope of what was contained within the town warrant, so that people have notice of what's going to be discussed and of what might happen at town meeting. And that's the source of my question about whether we had to have that in the warrant. And as long as it's in my discretion, I'm happy to proceed. I think it's a great idea, so thank you. I think it would work well.
Who will be making the motion?
That's right. Erica, who would you like to make the motion?
Kate, maybe? Sure.
Not necessarily. It can come later,
And
but
pass Fred the second,
Okay.
all right?
Fred will second, okay. All right, good.
Jim, as a matter of procedure, typically this is done often the same way that perhaps the capital budget items are done, or meaning
And we
you
would do it
read
as a
the
whole,
item and they
okay.
hold them. If
Okay.
someone, for instance, wants to dismiss all but Article 13,
Okay,
you might just read through and say Article 6,
okay, so I'll read each article
and it's
separately and ask for holds. And if there are no holds, it will be deemed. So we'll have a vote first as to the process of me reading the articles to be dismissed, asking for holds. If somebody doesn't hold, then the motion will be deemed to have been approved. If somebody does hold, then we'll have to field questions with respect to that particular held article, and then we'll have to have a separate vote on that article. Now, Erica, do you want Kate and Fred to be making the motion? If somebody does hold with respect to that article that was held, then when we have a separate vote, do you want Erica, Kate and Fred to be making that motion as well?
Yeah.
So Kate would make the motion and Fred would second. So you'll be using the same motion format that we use for the other articles where I read the items. Okay, so it would simply be saying that with respect to Article 7, I move that it be dismissed. Second, and then we'll have a separate vote on that. Okay? Okay, great, thank you. Article 2, with town salaries, that I was talking about before. It would be the same drill. I'll be reading the items. I'll be asking for holds. If there aren't holds, then it'll be deemed to be approved. We had some discussion about trying to streamline the process, but I think that there's always a lot of interest in the individual items. And if it turns out that if we try to streamline the process, as Bonnie Akins pointed out at one of our meetings, it becomes very awkward to then try to rework our way through to get the approval for that item. So I will be following the traditional approach where I'll be reading the line items and asking for holds, and then if there's no objection, yeah.
Mr. Moderator, you should point, before you begin reading Article 2, that Mrs. Hoffman did not make $544,000 in fiscal year
Oh, no.
2017.
Oh, sure?
She made $543,000.
I take it that first five is supposed to be a dollar sign.
Yes.
Man, you just got,
John, I'm really disappointed. I was going to ask you for a Okay, thank you for calling that to my attention. I'll be sure to mention that at the town meeting, right?
I guarantee you, our good friend Tom Crowley is going to jump to
Oh,
it.
yeah. Okay. Article 3, we will be dealing with the revolving funds. And, let's see, Mr. Hammerly will be making a motion with respect to that, and Ms. Herman will be seconding. I'm not expecting much discussion with respect to that, or is anybody here? Has there been much discussion about this? Was there any concern at the warrant committee meeting, Erica, or? No? Okay, good. Okay, Article 4 will be moving into the operating budget. And again, I'll be calling through the items, asking for holds. If there aren't any holds, then it will be deemed to be approved. If there are holds, we'll have to deal with each of those items separately. And Erica, Ms. Alders will be making the motion, and Mr. Kinder will be making the second. And Erica, for Article 4, you'll want to make the warrant committee the presentation for Article 4?
Yes, if that works for your committee, and you would make the presentation.
Yep, that would be fine. Will you be using a laser pointer, or will Mr. Rossetti be using a laser pointer?
We don't know. I can find out for you.
Well, tell him a steady hand is really key, otherwise we can cease it.
I will find out.
Okay. Article 5, capital budget, will be the same drill. Now, earlier, there had been some concern that there might be some disagreement with respect to some of these items, but I understand now that the capital budget, warrant committee, and the town departments are all in agreement. Is that correct? Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, very good. So Mr. Smith will be making the motion, Peter, and Mr. Bogowski will be making the second, and we'll be working through those items. Again, I'll be reading through each item separately, asking if there's a hold. If there are no holds, then they'll be deemed to have been approved. Okay, now Article 6
6 and 7.
is one of the ones that we're going to be hopefully dismissing in the consent vote, so hopefully we'll be able to move right through that.
So, excuse me, Mr. Moderator, should that still be in here?
Well, I think it's here out of caution. I think that it's possible that it will not be dismissed in a motion, so we'll just have to remember to make a note to ourselves. And if you see us up there starting to do something, flag me down to remind me, okay? Okay, thank you. Article 7 is the same with the sick leave, that hopefully it will have been dealt with in the motion to dismiss the group of articles. Article 8, road construction. Ms. Canny will be making a motion, Ms. Herman will be seconding. Craig, if there are any questions, should I direct these to you about this article? Okay, all right, great.
Yeah.
Felicia, anything?
No, it's standard. I was thinking you wouldn't have any questions.
Okay. Article 9, Conservation Fund. Mr. Andrews will be making the main motion. Mr. Smith will be seconding. To whom should I direct any questions if they come up about Concom? Okay, we'll track that down and we'll see. I don't expect that there will be any, but just in case.
Mr. Valente may be able to answer
Okay,
your questions.
right.
Because it's just to explain the revolving
Right,
funds
okay.
and then.
Carl, would that be okay? Sure. Okay. Okay, Article 10, Information Technology. Mr. Rossetti will be making the motion, and Ms. Canny will be seconding. $250,000 to study the needs. Should that go to you, Bob, if there are any questions?
Yep.
Okay.
Bob, are you going to do?
I might even do a quick
Do you want to do a
presentation.
presentation?
Yeah, I'll do a quick
Okay,
presentation.
sure. How long do you expect your presentation will be?
30,
No
40
more
minutes.
than 8 minutes.
Should've got 2 rings, Dave.
That's what you call that Volvian response.
Mr. Hadley.
To be enjoying this.
With
This looks like power.
All right, maybe we should have allowed a bell. Okay, so after the motion then, after the second motion would be made by Mr. Rossetti, it would be seconded by Ms. Canny. I'll turn immediately to you then, Bob, okay? Okay, Article 11, Stabilization Fund. Ms. Canny will be making a motion, Mr. Kendra will be seconding. Should this go to the superintendent, Erica, if there are any questions, or?
No, I'm going to make a presentation.
You want to make a presentation, Robin? Okay. How long will your presentation be?
No more than 8 minutes.
Okay, very good.
7 minutes and 31 seconds to be
Okay.
exact.
Well, I think Alon did a great job at the open warrant hearing, so I'm sure you'll do well at town meeting. So it will be the same drill, Robin. After Mr. Kinder seconds, then I'll turn the floor immediately to you.
Questions to Robin as well.
Right. Any questions to you also, Robin? Okay. Okay, Article 12 is another one of the articles that we were voting to dismiss. If it's not dismissed, Mr. Rossetti will be making a motion, and Mrs. Canny will be seconding. Article 13 is another motion to dismiss. If it's not dismissed, Ms. Herman and Mr. Hammerly. Article 14, another motion to dismiss, Dover Stabilization Fund. If it's not dismissed at for the consent hearing, then consent motion, then will be Mr. Pender making a motion and Ms. Elders making a second.
So Jim,
Yes?
if 12, 13 to 14, if there is a hold, John, you would take it?
Okay. I think they're gonna.
Yeah, I agree, but-
Yeah, but, okay, thank you, though. We'll go to you, John, if there are any questions about it. Okay, capital design fund. It'll be Mr. Hanley making a motion, Mr. McGoski seconding. I suspect that there is going to be some discussion about this. Who should I direct questions to? Do you want to make a presentation at the outset, Bob, or?
I think what's critical to say is we're not asking for money.
Yeah, I might speak, but I don't think I'll have an actual
Right,
presentation.
you know, because the critical point here is we're not asking for money, we're
Yeah.
asking you to allow us to use the money.
Do you want to say that?
Do you want to say
that?
I think it would be helpful if you stated that right at the outset so that people would understand exactly what the impact is of this, okay?
I think that's critical, when you say
Yeah.
no money.
Right. I think people's ears will perk up.
Right.
Okay, so I would turn it to you immediately then, Robin, after it's seconded. And then if there are any subsequent questions to you, Robin, or to
Sure,
Bob?
sure.
Okay, to you.
And I promise this will be much less than 8 minutes.
Okay, well, you're always very good at this, so I wouldn't expect anything less. Okay, Article 16, appropriation for the Carroll Community Center extraordinary repairs. I've heard some rumblings about this. Mr. McGoski will be making the main motion. It will be seconded by Mr. Andrews. Who would like to just give a brief explanation?
I could do it, or Ron.
Yeah, we are.
Right?
Whichever, who would you prefer?
I think at the moment,
Whatever you want.
I don't care.
you had the
I
slide.
did it at open hearing.
Open
I
hearing.
don't think I have a slide for this, but
Okay, so Bob, I'll turn it over to you immediately after the
Yep,
motion is
that's
seconded,
fine.
just
Yep.
for a brief explanation. Okay, Article 17, free cash in the 2020 budget. Mr. Smith will be making the motion, Mr. Andrews will be seconding, and John, will you be making the presentation on this?
Yes, so
Okay.
we will have a conversation about, to the extent of our conversation of free cash here and in Article 26.
Okay.
So we will most likely have a summation of free cash history here and more practical outcomes analysis of free cash in 2026.
so a presentation, John. There'll be a little presentation?
Yes.
So this is just discussing the framework.
The framework.
Okay.
Okay. Now, after John's presentation, will the warrant committee want to say anything, Erica? or-
This is for Article 17.
Right.
We hadn't planned to.
Okay, that's, I'm sorry, you hadn't or you
We
had?
hadn't planned to say.
You had not,
Article
okay.
17.
I just want to make sure if you had anything you wanted to add, okay. All right, fine. Since it's an important financial item, I just want to make sure that there aren't some other committees connected with town finances who don't want to make a comment on it. Okay, that's the, right. There was a question?
No, who do questions go to?
I'm assuming John.
Sure.
Yeah.
The intent of this, Dave, is just to give the participants at town meeting the framework of free cash, to give them the history for the past 12 months of how we've focused free cash and what our intent is with regards to the free cash discussion.
Okay. Then Article 18 is the reserve fund. Mr. Kendall will be making a motion. Ms. Alders will be seconding. Who will be speaking to this? Erica will, since it's the warrant committee, do you want to speak to it, or
It's typically the standard amount, so I think it would just be questions.
you don't think there'll be any questions?
Yeah, it's the same amount for that.
Okay. If there are any questions, who should they be directed to?
You can, if there's
To
questions,
you,
you can ask.
Okay.
So the one piece of information we should have available is how much was used in the past. Because that's the only question that ever comes up.
I think it's in the blue book too. Is it back in the blue book?
I haven't opened the blue book. Well, it doesn't matter that it's in the blue book.
Right, exactly.
I will have my blue book with these
Okay.
questions. We'll say that.
I think, I just anticipating, given the discussion we're going to be having about free cash and reserve funds, I actually think it would be helpful, unless people here persuade me otherwise, that it might be helpful if you just gave a 30-second summation because a summation would be quicker than people asking questions.
Sure. Do you want me to speak about just what the law prescribes? Or?
I think it just explains to people what it involves, and that it's the same thing that we've done every year.
Okay.
Because I think people are going to be particularly sensitive to questions about reserve funds and free cash, given the discussion that's going to be happening in a town meeting. And I think that this might be a way to sort of short circuit concerns that people have. Thank you. Okay, Article 19, unpaid bills. This is an 80% requirement, 80% approval requirement by state statute. And we'll be going through that, and thank God we have the clickers so we don't have to do a standing vote on 80%. Sometimes people, Mr. Andrews will be making a motion, Ms. Herman will be seconding. Sometimes people ask why it's hasn't been paid in prior years. To whom should I direct that question if it arises? Carl? Okay.
Dismissed.
Questions? Okay. Article 20?
We put them on our consent.
Sorry? Item 20 is on a consent? Okay, great. So hopefully it will have been dismissed. If not, Mr. Kinder will be making a motion and Mr. Rossetti will be seconding. And 21 also hopefully will have been dismissed. So it'll be the same drill. With Mr. Rossetti making the motion and Ms. Canny seconding. Okay, Article 22. Payment of tax bills less than $100. Mr. Herman will be making a motion. Mr. Hammerly will be seconding. I don't expect there'll be any discussion about this, but if there is, to whom questions? Carl, to you, okay. Excuse me, Article 23. This will be the acceptance of Dover Farms Road, Hughes Lane, Ann's Way, and Monroe Court. Mr. Taub will be making the, Mr. Taub will be making a motion. Now, this is a citizen's motion, so you'll be making a motion. And, I'm sorry, now how do I pronounce Mr. Badchurcher? Boddicher. Okay, well, I wasn't too far off, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Badcher. Okay, so you'll be making, you'll be seconding. Are you gentlemen going to make a brief presentation to explain, or would you like maybe Carl to explain what's involved with the acceptance of the town roads, Carl?
No. How have you handled this in the past?
It really comes up. And actually, the last time I remember it coming up was about 10 or 12 years ago, and I think somebody from the planning board actually just provided a brief explanation. Remember that, Craig? I think it was somebody from the planning board provided a very brief explanation.
I think on this road acceptance, Jim, would probably, believe it or not, would be the building inspector, because it's a 40B.
Yeah.
And he's the zoning enforcement.
Okay.
Or the town engineer.
Right, okay.
I've excused myself from this one, but Dan's a farm, I can help out.
Okay.
I mean, where it's a citizen's petition, Mr. Moderator, I think it does make sense to have the citizens explain the purpose behind the request for the layout.
Right.
And then any questions as far as the process or the impact can be handled either by zoning enforcement, or if they're legal questions, I can handle those as well.
Okay, great. Is that okay with you, gentlemen?
I will make the presentation, a short presentation.
Right, very good. Thank you. And I think, I think one of the things that the town will be most interested in is what's the impact on the town. I think they'll be interested in what's the impact on the citizens who live in the town, and what's the impact on the town in general. And I think that's how the sort of questions that you might expect in terms of town expenses and things of that sort. And also improving your quality of life. People want to hear that as well, since we all live, most of us live on accepted roads in town. So I think that if you can explain that in your brief comments, that would be very helpful for people to appreciate what's involved here. and help them consider how they should be voting. That'd be great, thank you. And then if there are any further questions, Craig, I understand you'll have to recuse yourself.
Right, on this one.
Right. So I'll look to the building inspector then probably, and we'll have to, Carl, can we be sure that he's invited to attend? Okay, great.
And Jim, that's 2/3, right?
No, it's majority.
What is it?
Majority. It's
There's-
not, oh, go ahead.
No, you go.
No.
There's no appropriation related to the acquisition of the property, so although there would be an acquisition of a property interest, unless there's an appropriation, it's a majority vote.
I thought I read that over there, so, okay.
Okay, it's Article 24, acceptance of, this one was not, okay. Dancer Farm Drive is a public way. Who will be making the motion for this?
Well, Brian. So both Brian and I are trustees, and we worked with Carl, and I'm sorry, we understood the agenda item was going to be at 8 o'clock, so I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
So I believe 2 weeks ago, we asked, we submitted a letter petition, and then we commissioned Cheney Engineering to turn our town, our as-built plan into a street acceptance plan. It was supposed to be delivered to Carl yesterday, and we just had an email exchange this afternoon that it wasn't delivered. Is that correct?
It has not been delivered yet.
So, you know, we've been hounding our engineer, Artie, who was, so I don't know what to tell you. We still obviously would like to go ahead with this motion. We also engaged Ben O'Brien, who's will be drafting the motion for the town meeting and also initiating the title search that was required by the town. So,
Yeah, Mr. O'Brien left, I guess. He was here.
He's downstairs.
Oh, he's downstairs, okay.
who's this?
Mr. O'Brien was here, but he left. If you could, I think it would be helpful, Nina, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it would be helpful that after you produce the title search document, if you could make sure that Nina gets a copy of that.
Yes, I believe Ben is in contact.
He has been, yeah.
Okay.
So I guess the question is, we were trying to submit the street acceptance plan, and unfortunately, we're hounding our engineer and didn't submit it. So I guess the question is, does that somehow impact our desire to have this proceed at meeting?
Yeah, from my perspective, the article is in the town warrant.
Okay.
So that means that you can make a motion.
Okay.
Now, I'm sorry, Nina?
Go ahead.
But that being said, the question would be, to what extent has everything been completed such that the town should accept the street? And for that, you may have a lot of homework to do with Carl and Nina, but Nina and Carl have been more involved with this, so why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you think is happening here?
Well, I don't know anything about really the status of this, other than I have been in contact with Mr. O'Brien about what the motion, how the motion should be framed, along with the motion for Dover Farms ways. My concern with the lack of plan at this point, so close to town meeting, and again, this is the first I'm hearing about it, is that the article does reference the plan being on file with the town clerk prior to the town meeting. That is in order, so, you know, folks that are curious or want to know what does this look like, I can go to town hall and educate myself before walking into town meeting. Now, I'm not sure whether anyone has tried to do that, but it would be a legitimate complaint at town meeting if someone stood up and said, hey, I tried to find out more about this plan and there's actually nothing on file, so I don't feel like we're ready to vote.
Okay.
So that is my concern. It perhaps is an academic concern. So Dover has never had a time limit of when things need to be on file with the town clerk. It just needs to be on file prior to town meeting. So I guess I would just put another thumb on the scale of getting in touch with that engineer, get it in as soon as possible.
We will do that. Again, the engineering firm committed to that. The transfer, my understanding is the transfer of the developer to the trust could not happen until the town signed off on the as-built plan. And I believe that has been happening because technically we couldn't, the developer couldn't transfer the trust to us. And that happened in January, so we must have met the as-built plan requirements. And again, we just have to convert them into the street acceptance plan. So we will continue to hound our engineer, and I'm sorry that, as Carl knows, he identified this issue 2.5 weeks ago when we were right on it, and just have been unable to, it's very disappointing.
Sure, I certainly understand.
Sorry, it also, the layout process, I have no idea where they are in the process. The layout process requires the selectmen to meet and vote on their intention to lay it out. It then needs to go to the planning board for a report if they choose to do so. That report needs to go back to the selectmen, and then the selectmen need to vote the layout at least 7 days before town meeting.
7 days before town meeting.
So if that has not happened,
That's supposed to happen today at 8 o'clock. That was the 8 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
We're referring to.
The second part of what you said. should
The
happen
layout
tonight.
vote.
We voted at our last meeting to accept the layout. Tonight, we were to vote to, that the layout was in fact received as you just described earlier, which you had.
and if you don't have the layout, you can't have that vote.
Right.
And so that can't be on file within 7 days. I mean, you need another meeting. I don't have a
So it's just a
calendar in front of me.
what I just heard. You tell me because this was our last window and we did not submit the street acceptance plan, that we would have to wait an entire year for the town meeting to file the petitions. Is that what I'm hearing?
That may perhaps be the impact. I'm hearing all this for the first time, so I'm trying to think through it in real time. I don't know I don't have a calendar in front of me, so I don't know whether the selectmen would have, for instance, if you got the street acceptance tomorrow, whether there would be time for the selectmen to meet 7 days prior to town meeting and get it on file with the town clerk. Again, that's not a local regulation, that's a state statute that requires that 7-day period.
Is it 7 business days or 7 days?
Calendar days.
So it has to be by Monday. If the selectmen, and is it too late to post a meeting for Monday now? Yeah.
Yep.
So could you just remind, when is the town meeting again?
Except, I mean, you
Town
could-
meeting is Monday, May 6th.
It's a week from this
So we
Monday.
can- for Monday.
Monday, May 6th, so I just heard from her that there isn't by statute any way for us to,
Unless you met on Monday and the selectmen could meet on Monday determining that,
Can't, because they couldn't post.
I understand, let me finish my sentence.
That's all right.
If the selectmen determined that there was an emergent reason to meet in order to deal with this issue, they would have to do that in their discretion. That, again, what we're talking about with posting is under the open meeting law, you need to post 48 hours prior to a meeting unless there's an exception, such as an emergency. Again, I'm not sure that a delay in a street acceptance of a year would qualify as an emergency, but that's within the board's discretion.
well, respectfully, our students paying roughly $160,000 in taxes. Our biggest line item in our HOA budget is snow plowing, which is roughly 3,000 or 4,000 a year by memory. So from our perspective, I think a delay of a year would be considered very, very disappointing, especially as we had been in a reactive mode. There wasn't a blueprint. And I think contact points, but we just found out 3 weeks ago that we had to write a petition letter for the meeting we had on the 11th. We found out on Monday. We worked with him to get a letter out to you guys. Carl told us we needed a street acceptance plan. We contacted Change Engineering that day just to convey that we haven't been dragging our feet, and we responded as quickly as we can. And we asked my partner, our co-trustee, Andy, asked back in January, the town, what things we need to do. And instead, if we hadn't been prodded, we'd be even further behind. So respectfully, I don't agree with that, and it's very disappointing. Again, we had an email from Cheney saying that they would respond and deliver to Carl's this yesterday, which is Wednesday. And again, it's just very disappointing to us because we've been scrambling very, very hard to get this done. So, can I just get a sense of what I need to do since you're town council as to what we can do? I mean, it sounds like we can ask for emergency meeting of the selectmen if we have the document by tomorrow. Is that like you guys within the room possibility?
That is up to the selectmen with the advice of the town administrator. If they choose to meet on Monday and it gets posted as an emergency meeting, that is an avenue forward. They are risking an open meeting law violation if they do that, but it's not up to me to decide.
So also predicated on receiving tomorrow.
Well, certainly they would need to have the plan. There's no acceptance without a plan.
There's another option here. We have a special town meeting planned for October 7th, Monday, October 7th. And town council is always the last to know.
Okay.
And so that gives you another option where at least you might be able to avoid the snow plowing and things of that sort.
Well, that's good to know too.
Some of the bills, and that's strictly within the discretion of the Board of Selectmen when they put together the warrant, but I see at least one member nodding his head.
That's just, drooping.
So I think what you want to do, sir, if I may suggest, is really outside the scope of our authority, the town meeting moderator's authority, but if you could work with the Board of Selectmen with respect to whether they have a potentially significant problem in terms of the posting requirements for Board of Selectmen meetings. And to have a meeting posted for Monday now at this late date, I believe they have to say it was an emergency, and it's not clear that this would qualify, and they would be potentially exposing themselves to prosecution if it turned out that they were inappropriately having a meeting in violation of the open meeting laws. So they're going to have to make that decision and about whether they can meet Monday, but you should be in touch with them and Carl. So that if that doesn't work out, it seems to me I would be perfectly willing to squeeze this in as a second item on the agenda for the special town meeting if the Board of Selectmen are willing to go along with it.
Okay, good. So we should follow up with Carl tomorrow.
Right.
Okay, and we'll do that. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Sir, could you say your name? Your name
My name
is
Charlie Yee. I'm at 6 Cancer Farm Drive.
Okay.
And I'm co-trustee with Brian and Deanne of the...
Very good. Very nice to meet you, sir. Thank you.
Same here, and thank you for all this patience.
All right, good luck.
Thank you. We'll have to sue Change Engineering.
Okay, so we will have to wait to see then how we're going to proceed with this article. It may be that we'll either be able to proceed or we'll have a motion to dismiss. So we'll have to wait to see. Carl, maybe you can let us know how that proceeds. And thank you, Nina, for your help with this. Okay, Article 25. Now, before we get into Article 25, we're hoping that it won't be 10:30 at night by the time we get to Article 25, but that might happen. So, I have the discretion to move this article to a different place in the town meeting. I could consider it earlier, so that for those of you who have to get up early the next day to go to school, you could be out. you could make the presentation, there would be a vote, and then you could leave. The only problem is that there's always a possibility of a motion for reconsideration. So it may be that you would want to be present for the entire meeting in any event. And I'll give you some time to think about this. I can announce at the beginning of town meeting that I've changed the order in order to accommodate children who have to go to school the next day. But very important, I can't tell you how many town meetings I've seen where something was either passed or voted down at the beginning of the meeting, and then 3 hours later, when half the crowd had left, half of the town meeting had left, it came up again on a motion for reconsideration. It was a totally different outcome. So you're really not safe until the meeting is adjourned. But I'm certainly willing to do that to try to accommodate people who might want to get home at a more reasonable hour. School children, not adult voting citizens, just school children.
We get drowsy too.
So just to clarify, I believe the sponsors of this article are the parents?
That's right.
So long as the parents were still at the meeting, if it were moved for reconsideration, then the parents would need to stand up and
Right, they would have to be willing to speak to it. You would have to be prepared to answer questions and speak to it, rather than to have the presenters, the group that made the presentation in connection with the motion. Okay, so let Carl know, and he can communicate to me, or Felicia, our town clerk, and they can communicate to me whether you want me to move it up a little bit earlier. That's okay. Okay. So the motion now, it was my understanding Kevin was going to be making the motion, is that?
I think he said he's not going to be present.
Oh, okay.
And he also felt that he shouldn't because of last year or something.
Okay, so who will be making the motion?
I'm making the motion.
Okay, I'm sorry, what's your name?
Stephanie Kubi.
Stephanie, yeah. How do you spell that name?
K-U-B-E.
Okay. And who will be making the motion, Stephanie? I mean, who will be making the second? So who will be seconding the motion?
My husband, John.
Okay. Okay, now, after you make the motion, we'll then have to have a second motion that we'll be asking the town meeting to vote to allow the students to make the presentation. Technically, the only people that can talk at town meeting are town agents and town registered voters. So, however, the town meeting has the authority to give permission to others to address the town meeting. And the way we would do that is through a motion that you could make. I sent the form of a motion to Carl. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it yet, but...
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Okay, so Carl could send you a copy of that motion. Basically what it would involve is you making a motion that the students be allowed to present a discussion of the motion to town meeting. And that motion would be seconded again. We would then move to vote on that motion to allow the students to vote. It would be a quick vote because we have the clickers. I suspect that it would be approved. Students would then make their presentation. We would have discussion on the main motion, and then we would proceed to a vote on the main motion, which is the motion about the plastic bags. Okay? So Carl will send you that second motion, the motion to allow the students to speak. Make sure you have a person who's going to second it, probably your husband, I'm assuming. He'll second it, and then we'll proceed from there. Okay. And you could also let us know about the order, whether you want to go earlier in the evening or not. Let us know. Okay. Yes.
Jim, I know, I was waving something away, but I know in other towns, the moderator will make the motion with respect to allowing non-residents to speak. So I think it's appropriate.
You think I should do it?
I think it's fine for you to do it. But I don't, again, I don't know if that's contrary to tradition in Dover, so.
Let me ask the town fathers and mothers here. I was trying to remember the last time we did something like this.
I don't, yeah.
I lived there 22 years, and I don't
Elsewhere.
remember it.
Last year, we didn't get the opportunity.
Okay, right.
It didn't work out.
Yeah.
So we can establish tradition. We can establish tradition.
Yeah, well, okay, and then let me just think out loud. Is there any problem with the moderator making that motion versus a citizen?
No.
You don't think so?
I know it's certainly done in Acton routinely.
I guess it
This
does,
governs the procedure of the
Right.
running of the meeting as
Right.
opposed to any substance.
yeah, it does pertain to the actual conduct of the meeting. It would not be going to substance. So, okay, yeah, that'll be fine. Thank you. That's a good suggestion. I'll make the motion then to allow the students to speak. And I'll need their names, if you could provide, I think we already have that. Okay, you have that here, okay. So I'll make the motion. Now, who will second?
Maybe your sidekick.
Yeah, give Dave something to do besides the
The
bell.
brains of the operation will second here. Thank you, David. And then we'll let me say that the only thing that bothers me about this, Nina, is that I'm making a motion that I'm then determining the vote.
Yep.
Now, with clickers, I guess that's less of a concern. If it were a voice vote,
Pretty transparent.
yeah, if it were a voice vote, then it would be potentially putting me into a position with a conflict of interest. I'd be calling a vote with respect to a motion I'm making. But with respect to where we have clickers, I don't think that would be a problem.
I agree.
Okay,
It's very transparent.
okay, all right, fine.
It's certainly up to your discretion, whether you're comfortable doing this or not. I mean, how it's worked in the other towns I've been part of for town meeting, as moderator said, you know, I'm going to make a motion to allow 4 students from the Dover Regional Middle School to speak on this article. Do I have a second? Someone yells from the audience, second.
See, we don't do that.
And then all in favor, everyone says aye.
Okay.
Any opposed? I say the motion passes without allowing anyone to
Okay.
say opposed, and then they go for it.
I just don't want to end up in the Globe spotlight team.
I understand.
Okay,
We'll help them spell your name though.
right. Yes, great.
Jim, maybe Nina, and how does that work when you say you have a treasurer or an accountant you look for information in the guest section? Is that the same situation? Does he have to approve that?
Typically, there's either a bylaw or a standard process or a vote at the beginning of town meeting that allows town staff or agents that are non-residents of the town to speak at town meeting. So that's, they're kind of within that purview of the town speaking, as opposed to non-voters.
We haven't done that, Craig, because traditionally in Dover, town agents have always been allowed to speak. So it's part of our lore, part of our practice. So I've never felt, and my predecessors never felt that it was necessary to take a vote, given that as far back as anybody could remember, really going back to Thorndike, that it was always understood that town agents would be allowed to speak at the town meeting. So we have not taken a vote on that. Okay, next Article 26 will be the second part of the free cash discussion. Mr. Hammerly will be making a motion, and Mr. Smith will be seconding. And John, will I turn this over to you also immediately? Okay. All right. And then lastly, we will have, yes, Erica.
There's some possibility, because we recently found out about presentation for 26. We're having our warrant committee meeting next week.
Uh-huh.
So we haven't decided, there's some possibility warrant committee might want to make
That'd
a
be fine,
short
sure.
presentation, but could I let you know?
Yeah, that would be fine.
For sure under 8 minutes.
Yeah, okay. No, that would be fine. I think
Dave,
that,
tell them what happens if it's over.
you know, I think that, as we've all discussed previously this year, this is an issue that's so complicated for the voters that I think that to the larger extent that you can explain it clearly and concisely, I think that it's only to our benefit.
Yeah.
Because I think this is something that really, it's hard to understand, and people really need to understand it in order to be able to vote intelligently. So I think I would appreciate, your, and if you could coordinate with John, that would be great so that it's not repetitive.
Definitely. And I think they may want to, we just haven't had our committee meeting yet, so I don't want to say
Okay.
discuss it as we're.
Yep, fine, good. All right, very good, thank you. Then we'll be moving to a motion to adjourn. I'm not expecting much debate on that at all. And that will be it. Before I adjourn the moderators meeting, are there any questions or comments? Have I missed anything? Yes, sir.
To make a motion, do you get up to one of the mics?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You'll walk up to the mic, and I'll explain this at the beginning of the town meeting. State your name and your address, and then you'll state your motion. Then I'll ask for a second. And actually, if you could bring your seconder up with you to the microphone, then he can immediately identify who he is, say that I second, and then we can proceed from there.
And in the brief presentation, is this a verbal presentation, or does it typically include?
It can include a PowerPoint if you like. We ask that the PowerPoints be submitted to Felicia a week ahead of time, because we do look at them just to make sure that they're appropriate in tenor and in tone. And I know that might be a First Amendment problem, but we do look at them. And Felicia does a wonderful job of getting them into our laptop, so that then you'll be able to proceed through your presentation with no difficulty.
And the presentation is made from the same mic?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, very good. Any other questions? Yes, Nina.
Mr. Moderator, do you have a process for motions to amend? I know some moderators certainly like to have them in writing as early as possible. It is possible that motions to amend could come up from town meeting floor.
Yeah.
Do you have a form? Or?
We do. We've been working on a form. Carl?
I didn't bring it this evening. We have a form. I will get some to you, and I'll show you one as well.
Okay. Yeah, it'd be great if you could take a look at it. Bless it for us. Okay. Very good.
I don't do that, but.
Okay. Any other
legally
questions?
bless it.
Yes. Oh, no, okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, yes, Felicia.
So I was just wanting to sort of nail down when we want to get presentations in my hands.
Right.
Because time is slipping away from all of us. The last possible date I would like is Thursday, May 2nd. So what we can have.
Presentation.
For PowerPoint. Yeah.
You're giving us an extension? Oh, you're so good.
For you, I have a special deal Monday.
Okay, well, thank you very much for attending the meeting, adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting for April 25th, 2019. And for those of you that watched the Moderator's meeting, thank you very much. We're looking forward to a very efficient meeting this year. Before we begin this evening, two items of notice that we would like you to consider at home, and for those of you here. We would like you to download the Blue Books. We're reminded by our town clerk, Mrs. Hoffman, that if you download the Blue Book prior to coming to town meeting, it will help our Wi-Fi significantly. Things will go faster, smoother if everybody has done this prior to the town meeting. We are also noting this evening that in 2 weeks from today, our Register of Deeds in Norfolk County is going to be here at the townhouse. Mr. O'Donnell will be here on the 9th, 2 weeks from today, so we encourage everyone to be here. Rick, could you zoom in on that notice and let everybody know that from, and should I put my glasses on to actually see that it's 10 to 11? God. It is 10 to 12.
On May 9th, Thursday.
Thursday, the May 9th, 2 weeks from today. Are there any other items from citizens before we begin the agenda items this evening?
So just to state the obvious, you could also bring your blue book.
You could bring your blue book. This
They
is
did
the
get
blue
mailed
book.
out to every household.
Please bring your blue book. And note in the blue book, there is just one typographical error that we picked up this evening. Mrs. Hoffman did not make $544,000 in 2017. There's one 4 too many in that article, which I'm sure the moderator will bring to everyone's attention at the town meeting. So without any further ado, our first item for this evening is the layout of Dancer Farm as a public way.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Valenti.
so both this layout and the next one is, the abutters were notified that this would be on the agenda for 8 and 8:05. So I would, suggest you just proceed with other items, agenda items, and then come back to that. So in case any abutters are planning to be here,
We will.
they have that opportunity.
We will do that. And Gareth, Charlie, apologize. We'll come back to this in 5 minutes.
Now we're going to 1.4.
We're going to go 1.4. We're going to go to the fourth item, the approval of the memorandum to staff regarding the annual performance appraisals. Mr. Valenti?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, at the end of each fiscal year, department heads complete their staff appraisals, noting the performance achievements and objectives for the coming year, and salary step increases are based on satisfactory performance. So we're looking for the board to authorize the interim town administrator to send an email to all boards and committees, bringing to their attention that they need to complete these performance evaluations by June 7th.
Any comment, question? Madam Hunter?
No.
Mr. Springett? I have just one question. Do I get to do Robin's?
Yes,
Do I,
I
under
think it's in there.
plays nice with others? No. Empathetic? No.
Be careful, John.
Effective, yes.
Yes. Patient? No. So, I will accept a motion to approve the memorandum to the staff regarding the annual performance appraisals.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Next item, AT&T's request for the town's approval to make modifications to the existing cell tower located on town property at 2 Dedham Street, otherwise known as the Town Garage. The planning board, at its meeting on March 11, 2019, issued a special permit authorizing these changes. Mr. Valenti, anything to add?
The only thing to add is we've also asked the installer to provide us with a structural analysis that the additional antennas can be handled by the structure, so.
Got it. Just a little bit wider, a little bit deeper. Would accept a motion to move and authorize the interim town administrator to sign the letter from Empire Telecom dated March 13th, 2019 that acknowledges and agrees the proposed modification to the wireless telecom facility on the transmission tower located at 2 Dedham Street.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Updates. Mrs. Hunter, any update for our rail trail viewers this evening?
So I do not have an update for the rail trail. I did have an email from one of the committee members and asking to set up a meeting to review the budget, and I reminded them that I was waiting for them to give me a couple of dates to set up that meeting. So it's all back on our calendars, and hopefully I'll get a couple of options, and then I'll sit down with Mr. Valenti and find a mutually convenient time for all, just to review the budget that we received from Beals and Thomas, compare it to the budget that Medfield received from Beals and Thomas, and talk to some of the other surrounding towns as to whether or not some of the whether or not the numbers appear to be reasonable.
Perfect.
So it's just part of the diligence process. We also did apply for a grant, and we should hear in a couple of weeks.
Couple weeks, yes.
Right, so So, any funding that we get in connection with that grant can be used towards the planning process, because that's what we applied for the rail trail. So
Thank you.
we're awaiting that.
Mr. Springer, with regards to Carroll Community Center, you had a page 1 story.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mark.
Yes.
Pay an extra for that.
I did.
Maureen, thank you.
As I had said at the last meeting, that the process that we are at this point is engagement with the community and outreach. The article in the paper was one of the first pieces that went out. There'll be a similar article that goes in the COA newsletter for I think it's May-June newsletter, and that probably should be out relatively soon. That'll go out next week. We, the board, I think, are going to be at the transfer station this weekend, Saturday? On Saturday.
You start at 7 a.m.
John starts at 7 a.m., I start at 11. And to hopefully meet with residents and answer any questions they have, presumably about town meeting and some of the articles if there are questions about that. And obviously I'll be there to handle any questions on Carroll Community and where we are. The committee will meet next week to finalize its communications plan and strategy and hopefully implement the multi-channel approach to informing the citizens about what's going on. And I think that's exactly where we are.
Excellent.
So, I think certainly some of these, I don't know what to call them, but informational sessions.
Yeah, forums, whatever.
Right, have been a catalyst to get the conversation started in the town. And there has been, as there always is, a lot of commentary about things that could have been done better and our inability to effectively communicate. So I have suggested to those people that had constructive criticism and suggestions to make things better, to reach out to you and Mr. Spalding.
Yes.
Some of, as I found, criticism is a great way to, or constructive criticism is a great way to rethink the messaging, and the messaging is critical to the success. So as a board, we should really listen to some of the feedback that we're getting so that we can incorporate it into the more mature message
Well, that's exactly right.
that we're gonna send out.
That's exactly right.
Because there is still a lot of confusion, and it's still an extremely emotional issue in town.
Among
And-
segments.
Right, among segments. And so one of the comments I had, well, you can't just say, maybe at the end of the day, we'll just tear it down. You have to make a presentation as to, well, what does that mean to the town? So that was good feedback. Well, what does it mean? Because in that building, there are town offices that would have to be relocated. So, as I've learned doing this for 6 years, it's important to understand the pushback you're gonna get so that you can realign your presentation, because after all, the communication is what's most important.
Well, I mean, the idea...
So you will be getting some calls from various individuals.
I think what we've done is we've actually put Ford's name on the bottom of most of these.
Well, somebody needs to, because I think some of what I have heard has been, extremely constructive. People are thinking about it. There is a concern that we have a lot of momentum here, and this is our one bite at the apple. And so let's try and get it as right as we can, addressing some of the feedback.
So two things. The strategy of going out into the talking with residents is precisely to have them shake.
And that's exactly, and that seems to be missed. People think this is a done deal and a done communication. And I said, the reason we are doing this is to get feedback and figure out
exactly
how to
right.
best
Exactly right.
Those exact
compose
words.
the message.
Yes, those were said at high school, middle school, every group that we've gone to have had those same type of
Yep. The,
remarks.
we're seeing stuff on social media.
Yeah.
We expect to use Nextdoor, and so part of the whole strategy around communication and engagement is making sure we have people reviewing posts on those social media platforms so that we can respond effectively. But it is really messaging, it's really trying to get the word out, and using multiple channels. But it also requires, once you hear about something, that there is engagement. It's not just inform or put information out, it's really engaging in a conversation. And sometimes engagement means taking a look at the website to see what's been posted, read the newspaper, look at social media, and so that the dialogue is literally two directions, not just broadcast into sort of the ether. It really needs to, we want it to be real engagement.
Well said. Well said. Thank you. Thank you both. With regards to the town administrator search, would you like to give a quick update?
I would give so the town administrator search is moving along nicely. We received a little over 30 resumes. The screening committee met. We narrowed those down to 6, and we have interview set up for those 6, and the screening committee has an expectation that they will bring back to the Board of Selectmen a recommendation to interview between 1 and 4 of the 6 candidates. Hopefully it's more than 1, so.
That's great. Thank you. With regard to the free cash update, we heard a lot about that at the moderators meeting this evening. You also heard us say that we will be at the transfer station on Saturday. Please bring questions, comments, concern. We went through a very thoughtful process with regards to the free cash discussion from May of last year through this evening. It has been something we've talked about, thought about, worked through, thought through, solicited feedback. The free cash discussion is something that affects everyone this year, next year, and 15 years from now. So we want to be considerate to everything that has been brought to us. We are going to be methodical in our explanation. We will have a detailed set of analytics at town meeting, but more importantly, we would like to engage early, often, with as many people as we can. So please bring us your questions and concerns, and we will be prepared. This is not going to be a 3.5-hour lecture on actuarial science, but it will be informative. So we look forward to the discussion.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
So you had asked the staff to put together some analysis on free cash.
Yes.
And then gave me some good feedback on it yesterday. So I have made some revisions that I'm prepared to at least distribute to the board tonight. But just looking at the clock and not keeping our guests from Danster Farms and Dover Farms waiting. Can we come back to that? I'd be happy to do that.
Happy to come back to that. So it is 8 o'clock, and we did allow Gareth and Charlie the ability for residents and citizens and abutters of both projects to come in. Gareth, we're going to do yours first, I believe. So last week, we approved the acceptance of the layout, and this week we will get to Dancer Farm.
Dover Farm.
Dover Farm. Dover Farm.
They both start with D.
1-3. So the motion We move the layout as a public way, Dover Farms Road, Hughes Lane, Ann's Way, and Monroe Court, as shown on a plan by GML Engineering Construction, Inc., dated May 15, 2018, on file at the town clerk, without accepting any responsibility for the maintenance, control, or replacement of the on-site shared septic system and all facilities related hereto, and any other utilities in the way. Is there anything, Garrett, that you would like to add to that, other than what we have, in addition to what we've read, and anything else that you would
No,
like
this
to
is
add?
fine.
Thank you. I would accept that motion. Seconded?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So thank you for staying. Thanks for the opportunity to let Charlie and Carl go through the process and receive the acceptance from their engineering firm. So Charlie, with regards to yours, the motion is the move the layout as a public way, Dancer Farm Drive, as shown on the plan by Cheney Engineering, dated today.
April 25th.
April 25th, 2019, on file with the town clerk without accepting any responsibility for the maintenance, control, or replacement of on-site shared septic systems and all facilities related thereto and other utilities in the way. We'll accept that motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And Charlie or any of the residents, anything else to add?
Just one clarification, the language is the same, but we don't have a shared septic system. That they wouldn't be relevant, but I don't think we have checked to the language. So we clarify that there's, so the town would not be taking responsibility for it anyway, and there's nothing to take.
Nothing to take responsibility for it.
Just clarify that.
Mr. Valenti, should we amend that to reflect no shared septic?
We should, so let me just reread this.
Control?
I mean, it's kind of the way each home has its own septic, it's not a shared. Just factually,
I think if we, where it says replacement of, and then strike the on-site shared septic system and then we'll just continue all facilities related
And all
thereto,
facilities related.
or any use.
Would you move that?
Yep.
As
The
amended?
amended, the
Second.
motion as
Second.
amended, yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Charlie, thank you for that. So thank you both for staying the extra half hour. There's nothing else, and for all those that
Thank
even
you.
recused
Thank you so
themselves.
much.
So thank you.
So just to reiterate what the moderator had said at the meeting,
Yes.
you probably want to have a one-page, PowerPoint, just with a few bullets as to why this road you're asking for acceptance.
Okay, and then you should plan for that at the town meeting.
Yeah.
But-
Charlie, are you going to make the motion at town meeting, or just?
Andy, so that's fine, because we have made the presentation at the open hearing. Right, so we'll, but usually just saying, Robin, just one page, I think ours was only, I think it was only 2 pages.
Short is good. You just have to say why and that you've completed all the requirements, right? And you should send it to the town clerk, Felicia,
My way.
next week before Thursday.
If you send it, you probably have my email address, you can send it to me and I'll get it to you.
23rd, okay. That will happen.
Okay.
Thanks everyone for your patience and Jay, good to see you. All right to see you.
Thank you.
And my best to Megan.
Yes.
She's your oldest.
She is. Yeah, good for you. Thank you. So Carl, can we go back to the free cash item that you prepared with Jerry Lane?
Yes. So first, this is the analysis, not the presentation. I wouldn't ever put this up on a screen.
I don't think it has enough data.
So,
On the screen.
but let me just sort of take you through a little bit of the model, and then you, if you have some time to look at it, you can maybe give us some direction on any other assumptions. So we tried to do a few things here. We tried to first make a projection of free cash for the next 3 years.
Okay.
Because what we're talking about is drawing down our free cash. And we have good data for doing that. We know what our free cash that comes from revenues in excess of estimates are, which is row 2. So I used the historical data on row 2 for free cash that comes from excess revenues. Same thing for row 3, turnbacks, appropriation turnbacks. Again, historical data there and other adjustments to free cash. So in row 5, we came up with what we estimate free cash would be going forward. We also then, starting with row 6, looked at the uses of free cash. So up to row 5 is what builds free cash. Starting from row 6 through 14 are the uses of free cash. So a couple of things where we could use your feedback on. Rows 8 and 9. So we heard at open hearing that the Capital Budget Committee is expecting a pretty significant increase in capital spending in 22 and 23, fiscals 22 and 23.
That's related to the roof work
Primarily related to the roof
at the
work.
region in Chicago?
Yes.
Yes.
So we could.
Although also in this building,
Townhouse.
townhouse as well.
So with respect to the regional capital, we could, I know that they were having their on-site insight report updated, and that they had refined some of their estimates, so we could touch base with the business manager over there. And we should also make sure that the numbers we're using represent our best estimate of what Dover's share would be, and not 100% of.
This is the Dover
Okay,
share,
okay.
yes. And the assumption here is that this would be done through cash. Now, it doesn't have to be.
Exactly.
It could be done with debt.
Right, and so that would be an option that we have available to us as a town.
I would like to see, and these are the formulaic approaches we have been discussing for the past couple of weeks. Certainly last week at our last meeting, when the Board of Selectmen unanimously voted that the amount proposed to reduce the tax rate should be less, that we would like to see, I think we're in agreement that we would like to see exactly this type of analysis, and that we would like to put numbers into the formulas that show a more gradual decrease in cash, free cash, and a potential, as Mrs. Hunter just pointed out, combination of borrowing and use of free cash for these capital items. Again, to not have a either way spike impact on borrowing and on the tax rate. So we discussed the potential unintended consequences in the third year of a 10%, my number was between 10 and 12% increase in a third year without the same level of rebate, if you will, that we're proposing on the tax rate this year and next year.
And after our brief discussion yesterday, the second page of this, which I'll get to, is the more gradual use, but I want to make sure if we need to make any changes to the model, I have your feedback, but then we can play with the use of free cash easily, because this is all linked.
I just have one question on the model. For capital items, why isn't there an entry in fiscal year 2021 for capital items? It's just small.
Because all the capital items,
Because there were none at the schools.
right.
So is
Do you
this,
have a projection for 2021?
so I'm confused. What fiscal year are we doing the budget for now? 20?
So
Okay,
this
so
is
in
our
20, there
first
was,
year.
right, that's why I say check. There is definitely a projection.
Okay,
Well, there should be capital item subtraction for both fiscal year 20 proposed as well as fiscal year 2021, right?
because my intent was I picked it up from,
I think that the main takeaway is the reduction in free cash under the current proposal brings free cash from 9.7 million down to 5.5 million.
But it's more than that, because where's the 1.7 million that the Warren Committee uses to balance the budget?
well, 1.6 of it is in row,
Oh, so that included the 1.6?
yes.
Okay,
includes
all
the
right,
one.
okay.
But you're right, Mr. Springer, I did not pick up the number for 2021.
Just a question.
Nope, I'll
Right.
drop that in, which will only make it look a little worse, but.
Right.
Well, no, I just
Well, I
want
won't pick it up. No, but it's more accurate.
It makes it more accurate.
So
and
thank you for,
I think what happens, Mr. Valente, is what we talked about last week and what the analysis and what the conversation you and Jerry and I had after our meeting last week and again yesterday is what we want to avoid is giving money back in a one-time effort that has the consequence of driving the tax rate back up significantly in 2 years from now. So if we will see ratepayers in 2 years from now have at least, on average, a $1,100 increase in their tax bill from the year before. So the median household that pays $13,700 would have a $1,100 increase, at least 8.5. My numbers originally were 10%. If we put in Mr. Springett's numbers, we add what Mrs. Hunter was just alluding to, that number gets up closer to 10%.
So can I ask a couple of questions on this model? So, on the transfer to OPEB stabilization fund, the 1.6 million, are the way we're showing this, is this assuming there would be additional transfers in subsequent years of 1.6? So, okay.
Yes.
All right. All right.
So one point.
So
Over 10
then-
years, we paid the liability.
So then, why aren't we also seeing it, why are we seeing the 1.6 as a reduction in the tax rate here, but not in the subsequent years?
Because they didn't propose that. Because Warren did not propose the reduction further than 2020 and 21.
well, let me do sort of two answers, or you're both good. So, in row 17,
Okay,
the board had talked about what you want to have as your metric or your target for free cash and not dropping below 10%.
correct.
So you can see that in 20, it's 13%, so you're within your guideline. In
Right.
21, it's 11%. But then you're at 5%.
Right, which is
So-
not a very comfortable,
No, so that's why I didn't continue any reduction in the tax rate, because you're below your target. And if
Right.
you look, when we get to the next version of this, where I spread out that reduction, you'll see the numbers
Okay,
look a little
okay,
different.
all right, okay. I just want to make sure I was reading it right.
Oh, and-
Okay,
and-
all right.
I do have some comments. I mean, right now, we're assuming 0 for the other proposed but deferred stabilization accounts.
Correct.
And when I read Article 26, we were talking about tax stabilization. Right? Article 26 is appropriate monies for tax stabilization.
Well, this
This really does not-
this destabilizes the tax.
Destabilizes.
Right.
Right, so it's very confusing. I mean, what we should be doing, I think, as a board and with the warrant committee, is looking for a way of stabilizing the tax rate. Not going into volatility situation like this shows. And the only way that I know to do that is to, I mean, we've talked about the causes of, money flowing back into the town. We might be able to do a slightly better planning exercise so that the excess revenue and coming back from, the underestimated revenue and the overestimated expenses can be narrowed. But I understand that right now that the, on a $40 million budget, the projections are off maybe 3 to 5%. So we can tighten up the flow. We can certainly do something with the policy decision that we made around circuit breaker reimbursement.
Let me give you a real life example. I was talking to somebody from the town of Medfield, which I think is a very well planned town.
Yep.
Medfield, a couple of years ago, I don't recall exactly when, gave back a significant amount of free cash to reduce the tax rate. They right now have a very uncomfortably low balance in their free cash. If I recall this conversation, the individual said that the Board of Selectmen wanted to stabilize the tax rate at $1.7 million, which is very low, and I could have misheard that number. Medfield now is their population is expanding, and they are going to embark upon building projects, a new school, which is going to be probably one of the most expensive building projects that Medfield has embarked upon in a while, or if not ever. But because of the decline in their free cash balance, their rating now is a AA and not a AAA. And so that means the debt is more expensive to all taxpayers. So these are unintended consequences that arise from really, this is for, to use a sports term, this is a marathon and not a sprint. And we really need to approach this cautiously with the ultimate goal of finding a balance that decreases the increase in our tax rate, which is what we're trying to accomplish. Right. And by doing that, you're going to stabilize, in effect, your tax rate. And so, I don't say don't give any money back. I just want to be very cautious about how much money we give back and understand the impact that's going to have in years, in the near future to the town. Because as we've said time and time again, we are in a lull with respect to building projects. But we're going to have building projects. We're going to have to renovate the townhouse. We're going to have to fix our schools. Right. And this is the evolution of towns. You're constantly doing this. And I would say interest rates are probably going up sometime. Right. So we should really be cognizant of being cautious and having a much more methodical plan. And I just, at this point, and this analysis just drives home my concerns about this $2.5 million rebate or tax reduction.
I'm going to come back. We have, as a country, have been experiencing a very prolonged recovery.
Well, also because it's been very slow. Right. It hasn't been like other recoveries.
We have history that we're dealing with is positive economic growth over a relatively long period of time.
Longest expansion in history.
Right. So that's not going to.
It's going to end at some point.
And even in biblical days, they were talking about during the fat years you save, during the lean years you spend. Right? We're at the top. We got to be close to the top of the fat years. We need to be careful. Secondly, I don't think there's been any town government that's ever gotten in trouble by having too much cash reserves. It just doesn't happen. That's not how you get into trouble.
That could be the first.
You could be the first. And I think going back to several discussions, I mean, as a board, I think it's our responsibility to propose policies that delineate when we should be saving for known future expenses and when we should be borrowing for known future expenses, and so that there is really kind of a rule of the road. I think too many people believe that free cash, which we need to stop talking about it as free cash, is the selectmen's
Slush fund.
Right.
And it's not.
It's not. It's an accounting.
No money can be spent without the approval of town meeting. I mean, that's why we have town meeting. That's why it's important to come to town meeting. That's why it's important to prepare for town meeting and exercise your right to vote. When we're talking about what's going on in the future, I guess I get upset because there are several known potential expenditures that have seemingly not been completely considered. And I will name them. I mean, they're in October, we will go to the town and ask whether or not they would like to renovate, carol, or build a new facility for the town. That has implications. The range of numbers that we're looking at are 10 million to 14, 15 million, based on other towns' expenditures. We haven't gotten to the question of funding, Carol, that kind of renovation. There's probably multiple ways of funding. We may borrow all, we may borrow some. We may use free cash for some. We may look for philanthropy to help offset the cost.
And most likely, it's a combination of all of those.
Most likely, the most sensible thing to do would be to have a combination. That all of a sudden, that number can be impacted. We've talked about the townhouse renovation. I think we're going to try to have an on-site insight report done of all town buildings, including the townhouse, and we'll have a much more informed view of what our potential expenses may be regarding that. We're talking about
land conservation.
Land conservation.
It is the table this year.
It is one of the key priorities of town residents. And that could be a reasonably big thing. We have deferred investment, leading to probably a spike around automating a number of the operating functions in the town. These things, to me, most of these things, with the exception of the large ticket items, are things that normal people would save for. We saved. And we may actually have been in a lull in terms of using cash reserves because we've done several changes to the way that the capital budget process has worked, and we've been in a relatively stable period in terms of putting together metrics around when to replace items. And it just may be a low period. All of that needs to be thoughtfully considered as we think about how to keep the AAA rating of the town, meet future obligations, and minimize spikes and dips in tax rate.
Yeah, well said. Add drinking water to Elm Bank access.
Can we drink something besides water?
We can drink something besides water. But everything that you mentioned, probably in things that we haven't.
So I do just have like a few comments on assumptions. So when I think about rolling the free cash, one of the things I typically think about is what percentage of the turnbacks is circuit breaker. So for instance, if of the $2.1 million circuit breaker is $750 or something like that, what I did was I used it in the following year as a turnback. So because you were getting it back and we were sort of expecting to get it back, I would use it as not a turnback, as a reduction in the tax rate. So I would always, right, so I would always assume that some number in here I was getting back,
Mhm.
and I would use it as
You'd use it in
as
row
a
14?
right, in row 14.
And I can build the model or options any way you'd like
Right,
for
well,
14, yeah.
I'm just telling you what I did, I don't know if
Yeah.
it's good, if it's a good assumption or not. The other thing is, on the OPEB stabilization fund, we talked about the $1.6 million being a down payment, and then coming up with the actuary with some sort of a plan on supplemental funding to that liability, so that in some period of time, maybe 10 or 14 years, we would bring that fund up to maybe a 60% funding level with, decent assumptions on investment returns. So I would say, looking at this $1.6 million may be a little bit aggressive, but, again, it's an assumption. So,
And if you like another option with the less aggressive, it's as easy as just dropping it in.
right, so, I'm just trying to think, well, because somebody, the criticism we may get is, well, you're just being really aggressive about funding all that stuff. So, I'm just trying to think about what has worked in the past as we tried to roll this number forward. So that would be my my input. Also, again, I think since it has been practice to fund the regional capital in cash, it's not a bad assumption, but we should flag that to say, we do have an option to bond this. Now, this is a memory lane thing, so I could have this completely wrong. So when it comes to bonding, I guess bands or temporary bonding instruments, you can do under $1 million, but you really need something over $1 million to float a permanent bond? Am I making this up, or?
You can ban any amount of money.
Okay, all right.
So I
So
would.
this was stuff I just made up in my mind. Okay, that's fine.
Talking about making it up.
Can I just add?
Sure.
Just a clarification to your question, Mr. Springen, about the capital for 21, that it was 0, you pointed out. It was a
There's
blank.
not a number there, yeah.
Yeah, and actually, as I'm thinking about it, I didn't print all my footnotes when I was doing this. That was actually intentional. And the reason is that in the 20, the year we use as our base year, we're doing $726,000 of capital with the tax levy. So if we did it this year, I made the assumption we can do at least $726,000 next year. And I actually made that same assumption for 22, where it says $1.8 million, because the real number for 22 for capital is $2.5 million from our.
Okay.
But I discounted it, so I didn't
Which
I didn't want to
makes sense.
overstate.
Right.
So does that
Got it,
follow?
Right.
Yep.
And my footnote says that, but like I said, I didn't print out all my footnotes. Yeah.
So what would be an interesting exercise is to take this and say, if I maintain the free cash balance at 15% of the operating balance, how much wiggle room do I have with, because we don't want to get down here.
No. So when we proposed to warrant in February a total of 2.5 million of usage of free cash, it was to get to the average increase that free cash went from at the end of the year to at the beginning of the year. So that number began, the total number, so we went back 4 years. We took the 4-year average, which was about $2.5 million. So we used that number to say, if we assumed at least 2.5 million, we could then make an adjustment over and above that if you wanted to do the other items that we took off the table, right, prior to February. So if we had a land conservation, if we had a roof, if we had options that we needed the money for, you still had the ability to fund your OPEB, you had the ability to stabilize the tax rate, but rather than 2.5 million, it was closer to 1.25 million or 1.5 million in the first year, and then closer to 1 million, 1.25 in the second year, third year, and fourth year. So that number, that 1 million extra or 1.5 million extra, doesn't give you the same smoothing effect as just using a total of 2.5 in the first year. We're using 5.5 in year one versus 2.5. Essentially, obviously we can't speak for Warren and their methodology, but we're all using the same numbers. We're just using them in very different places throughout the budget. Does that make sense?
I think I also.
Robin?
No, I think it's very difficult to follow, and you're gonna lose people if that's
Well,
your
that-
explanation.
Yeah.
No, I'd agree with that. I think that it's gonna be difficult to follow forward
So-
regardless, but.
So I do come back. Go ahead, I'm sorry. No, please.
I think page 2, and we can publish a more edited version of this, page 2, which highlights exactly what we're discussing, a more consistent smoothing effect of the process.
And just before we talk about page 2 and that smoothing, the only other thing I want to point out on this page is the last row, page 23, row 23, because this is the impact on the taxpayer.
Right.
Residential taxpayer. In this case, the median, it's based on the median property tax bill, which is an assessment of about $1,040,000. So in the first year, if the give back at town meeting is $2.5 million, the median tax bill goes down by 6.6%. So everybody looks like heroes in 20. But then you can't continue that. So the following year, you get a 6.3% increase. And then the following year after that, you get an 8.5% increase. So your point, Mr. Chairman, about we've lost the smoothing can be best illustrated by in that row 23, the impact on the residential taxpayer.
So the delta is 12%?
It's a 12% swing.
12%.
So it's not, I mean, that's the important part, right? It goes up 12.
No, well.
6 to 6. 6 minus the 6 plus.
No, because it's always, the delta is always from the prior year.
No, 20 to 21.
So from 19, current year, to next year, 20, it goes,
I think what Mr. Spring had said is over the 2-year
oh,
period.
over the 2-year
Yes,
period.
it goes up
20.
14%.
Yep.
Well, I'm not sure that's what's going on.
Well,
I
just
think what's going on is instead of a tax rate going, as you said earlier, the stabilizing, you get a trough and then you get a peak. And what does that accomplish? So on the second alternative, version 2, I've tried to do some smoothing of
So
that.
before we get there, one of the points that has bothered me for a long time is the amount of circuit breaker money. Circuit breaker money, from when I was on school committee, has doubled. And I know that the state reimbursement rate has also gone from a pretty low rate back in 2008 to, I think it's over 70% now. So circuit breaker, we gross fund circuit breaker, which means that the schools put into their operating budget fully loaded special education monies, knowing that there's going to be a return. So it really makes sense to me to separate special education circuit breaker and maybe even special education expense, because my suspicion is it's a driver, and we need to be careful about it. But more importantly, what we do with special education is a result of a policy decision that we've made in the past. And so in a sense, we're overtaxing.
No, we're not,
Well,
because
in
we're
this-
using free cash to
We're
reduce the
using free
rate
cash,
by
But
what?
if, to go, circuit breaker now is about $1 million. If you took circuit breaker and used that as your tax stabilization money, and that would be, so.
It's gonna do the same thing. I mean, it's not, it's,
Easily explainable, no?
but it's still, I mean, you know, what we've done, whether intentionally or not intentionally, is until last year where there was an error made at town meeting on plugging the gap, we have historically said, you know, within our gross budget, there's, just for lack of $750,000 circuit breaker reimbursement. So by utilizing some amount of free cash to plug the gap, in effect, what you're doing is you're hedging against that 100% funding of circuit breaker, because you're saying, hey, you know what? I know I'm probably gonna get $750 back. So, you know, because in 3 years from now, the state may decide, which they did before to us, that we're not giving you back 70%.
They give you 40.
Right, so at least you're not in the hole. So I've always felt that that was a decent policy decision. And we were offsetting the impact to the taxpayers by being cognizant that we were going to utilize some amount of free cash.
But it looks like we have turnbacks of $2.5 million.
Well, so to your point, you could break that.
I think it should be, break it out.
Break it out and just say the best estimate of circuit breaker or reimbursement is X.
And then when you look at your turnback based on your operating budget, X, your projections are reasonable.
Well,
they fall back into that 3-4% range.
Right, and that's what our budget turnbacks are, between 3 and 4%. You know, some years it's higher. You know, you're going to run into things in years where, when you're doing the blue book and you're making assumptions about how much free cash you're going to use to plug the budget, you're assuming that warrant articles that are recommended are being funded.
Right.
But there are going to be years where things don't get funded, and I would look at it as a temporary increase in your free cash, because ultimately the proponents are going to try and get, so what we call in my budget and forecasting analysis is they're timing differences. They're not permanent. Ultimately, you're going to spend that money. It's just not when you thought you were.
All right, sorry. You want to go to page 2?
Yes. So the difference in page 2 is primarily to look at row 14, which is the reduction of the tax rate amount. So in this case, what I did just for the model is, in fiscal 20, rather than $2.5 million, I did $1.5 million, and then in the subsequent years, I stepped that down each year by $500,000. It still puts you below your target if, at that point. It's 3% below. It's not, you're not on life support. 7% is certainly acceptable. But if you then look at row 23 in terms of the impact of the taxpayer, it's not as, the swings aren't as wild.
Right, it's much more
much smoother.
consistent, especially in
And
the
you
outgoing
could
years.
play with it to even make it more consistent. But it gives, you know, a reasonable decrease in taxes in 20, and then reasonable increases in taxes in subsequent years.
Right, and there are also levers we can pull within this model. We could make, we could make decisions to bond some of the
But you want to preserve those options, right? Options.
Right, and I think every year there's going to be options.
And every year, there's also going to be options of spending.
Yes, of
Right.
course.
No,
So-
but
And so
this is a projection. It's just.
It's just, yeah, it's just a projection, just a model, but it may, something like this may be helpful when you engage with the warrant committee.
Right.
And they may want to see different assumptions, which is fine, but at least then everybody's working off the same numbers in the impact.
And that's what's so powerful about this, it's visual. So you say, listen, you're not, this is how this decision could potentially impact the citizens of Dover, assuming that some of the other assumptions that we're making are correct.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean it's going to happen, because assumptions can change along the way, but this is.
The other thing I also want to stress, and we've tried to stress this from the very beginning, is anything that we do with regards to OPEB or anything that we do with regards to region, specifically the OPEB, we determine that on an annual basis. It's not something where we're putting in stone that we're going to do for the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. This would be a year-by-year assessment. So, Mr. Valente, thank you very much.
Can I just ask then one question based on your comments? When I make revisions to this, should I, on the transfer to the OPEB stabilization fund for the out years, be less aggressive than $1.6 million?
Yeah, I
Go to
would.
Go to
Right.
$1 million? Is that?
Do you have some experience with this? 'Cause
Well, I
I
know.
would think the sooner you pay it down, pay it up, the better. But you're
Well-
talking about a different target.
It's a different
Well,
target,
the-
and also interest
the-
rates as
right.
they rise help.
The liability goes down, so.
So we should get it, do you have enough, sort of a feel for the model?
And again, you have to make an assumption of how long do you want to take? So there are a number of factors that feed into that. It's the returns you get on your investments, how long, the duration of time to get to your target.
Interest rates
Interest rates, as they go up, the liability goes down,
and the cost of insurance.
and your utilization. I mean,
How many
right.
people retire at the time and how many people are in the pool. So you have factors that are actuarial based, you have factors that are utilization based.
So we do this for the town, right? There's an
Right,
OPEB.
but for the town, the actuary put together a table, but for this exercise,
Right.
use 750. I mean, 750,000.
For each year of the
Yeah,
out
each
years?
year.
Okay.
It's as good as any number.
It still gets you in the 9th year over 50%.
Well, we don't know that.
Well, that's true, you don't know, assuming that number.
You don't know. There are
that
too many
number.
factors.
Right, so that's why it gets adjustable.
Yeah.
Right. And we could definitely, and we probably should just ask the actuary if they could work up a rough supplemental funding schedule for us, with the goal being that by the 10th year, we would like to try and be around 50 to 60% funded, and then they could give us some numbers. I think that's what we did for the town. They gave us a supplemental funding schedule.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else? But thank you. It's
No, I mean,
But this is really good.
Any other alternatives to the model? We can provide 5 different versions of this. if you'd like.
It speaks exactly to what we were discussing.
The key is row 23, because that's how it impacts everybody's pocketbook, so it makes people understand.
Whether it's 14% over 2 years or the 10% in year 2, it's a significant amount of money. Thank you very much.
It's 1.7 now, John.
Went to 1.7, interim town administrator will provide the updates on the following projects. Any updates, Mr. Valente, to report with regards to the website, town meeting webpage?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, so a few updates for the board. First, the board had asked staff this year to create a town meeting webpage on the website, which is up. The Blue Book, you were talking earlier about residents to download the Blue Book. Well, that's where you go, actually, to download it, is
Very nice.
to the town meeting webpage, so it is there.
Check it out.
Earlier tonight at the moderators meeting, where we saw drafts of all the articles in motion, so those are all up on the webpage as well. So if somebody wants to see the motions, including articles that will be dismissed, we have those all up on the town meeting webpage on our website. And if we had talked about having presentations, sometime next week, we can also put any presentations up for the article up on the website as soon as we have those.
So incentive to those people making presentations to get them done early.
Oh, that's right, you get more free advertising.
Right, you get free advertising. Or some constructive feedback.
I like how you call it constructive criticism. Criticism at the beginning and feedback at the end. I like that.
It's more positive,
We're looking for most
constructive
of the
feedback. Second, in terms of the new town website, so the consultant who's working with us has made all the changes to the overall shell of the website. They were made, they look great. We're now putting in all the information. A lot of it's just being ported over from the old website to into our new website. Some of it we're organizing differently, because the old website was a little bit more confusing than I think it needed to be.
It's hard to find.
It's hard to navigate. But we had another meeting today, Mona and Diana and the town clerk and myself, and this is coming along nicely. I think I've said to you, we think we'll go live we're targeting to go live by July 1st. I think there's a chance we'll even be earlier than that date.
Wow.
Third, in terms of the assistant town administrator recruitment, so we had a good response to that recruitment, and of the response, there's 10 resumes and applications that we're going to interview for. So I've started doing an initial screening interview. This week I'll have finished 4 of the 10, and over the next week I'll finish the sort of screening of the remaining 6 or 7. Based on that, we're going to then set up 2 panel interviews, more lengthy and in-depth. One panel will be senior staff doing the interviews, and the other I would like board and committee members. And I've talked to the chairman about either a member of this board or a former selectman, whatever your choice is, to be on the board and committee panel. I've talked to the personnel board. They'll have somebody on that panel, a member of the warrant committee, and then we have another board member, Kathy Wells, who's agreed to be on the panel. And then we hope with those 2 panel interviews to then narrow that down to the top 2 or 3. And then if the timing on the town administrator search goes according to plans, I think then there's a good chance the new town administrator and myself can do the final interviews and have the new town administrator part of that selection process.
So that was one of the comments that the Collins Center made recently, was that since we're getting so close to making a decision, that it was their recommendation that we have the new person involved. At first, they had said delaying it, and I said that one of the issues we have is there aren't enough people to do the work, and delaying it is just another.
We're delayed at 7 months, right?
Right, is another 6 months realistically of asking the few people that we have left here to do more work. But it does make sense that if we do have a finalist, and hopefully we will, then that person could be involved in this as well.
And then it's not on the list here, but just one other brief update. I know the board is aware of the health situation at the regional high school with some students who are on a trip.
I wasn't until you sent the email, so I appreciate that.
So because I'm getting this sort of somewhat secondhand and also from email, I don't want to speak about the specifics of the situation or answer questions. But two things that I could report. It appears that in terms of the health protocols that need to be in place, they are in place at the high school. In terms of the students who were diagnosed with the norovirus, they are not in school, and there's a 72-hour period they're being kept out of school until they're no longer showing symptoms. So that appears to be all in place. Secondly, I did set up a meeting tomorrow for myself and 2 members of the Board of Health to meet with the superintendent and the head nurse for the schools, the regional school system, to do 3 things: make sure our Board of Health has completely updated on what's going on, and secondly, to really talk about the communication protocols on this. I found it, and you found out about it sort of a couple of days after it happened. The Board of Health in the same thing. So I think we want to, and even the state office that is really overseeing this and advising us was trying to get in contact with folks here and had a difficult time contacting us, our Board of Health, to keep them up to date. So we're going to meet tomorrow morning and just talk about how we want the communication protocols to.
I do know from firsthand experience, because we had a close friend and a neighbor who was on the flight on the trip to the Galapagos, and the school was notified right away. The school knew about the situation almost instantly. So parents were notified. Obviously the airline did a very good job. The airline quarantined a plane at Logan. So the incident began, the whole process and the dissemination of information began on the plane. Before landing or on the landing? Yeah, before. And from what I was told by the parents. So I guess this is a very good thing. I think it would be a good process for us to become aware of, and I would say that the schools are going to be on top of it as they are in every case like this. And of course, Board of Health should have some type of role in just a preparedness process.
And I think that's where the largest concern is just making sure that our Board of Health is kept informed, as everybody else is. They did not feel that they were completely in the loop on this.
No longer have kids in school.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
A second on the 3 firms we're going to talk to on the IT side?
Sure. Go ahead. So the board had put a warrant article before town meeting looking for funding to do not only a complete assessment of our information technology or IT technology and applications, but hopefully to then start an implementation plan. So Mr. Springett and myself are meeting with 3 firms that do this type of work. We met with the first one today, and we have 2 on Monday. The other 2 firms we'll be meeting with on Monday. I think, at least with the first firm, I think doing the work, this seems to be something that is not uncommon. It's sort of, they feel very comfortable doing it. I think one of the things we came away with, at least between the 2 of us, is because our systems are very modest, I'll put our IT systems, we don't have to worry a lot about having legacy systems that we don't want to get rid of.
Right.
So we're actually sort of in a good place that if we need to make improvements, we don't have big investments made in our applications, our software applications. So that could be a good thing. Not
There's
been good so
always a
far.
positive that comes out of everything.
Opportunity, challenge, opportunity, you know, opposite sides of the coin.
When you have nothing, you don't have to throw a lot away.
But I think certainly if the board has any questions or it comes up at town meeting, we should be well prepared to respond to that.
It was a warrant
Right.
question at the time.
Right. I will tell you that in the 3 screening interviews we had this morning, one piece of software came up 3 times. And I think I'm going to get the name wrong. I think they said it was One Click. And it's software that residents can let the town know of things that have come up. So if a pothole comes up, you take a picture and send it to the town website, and it gets directed to the right department to fix it. But it was just comical that all 3 referred to the software.
Well, I did push them on whether or not they knew of other towns in similar situations that they could point to as sort of models for us, but they deferred.
Anything else to add, Mr. Montague?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. We'll move to
We have consent items.
consent items. Consent agenda items. Accept a motion to approve the consent items. Liquor license, I know Mr. Spring is going to be just dreadfully sad that we don't read all the liquor licenses this evening.
At our next meeting, you're
Yes.
gonna do it, because, after that, it's gonna shift.
Yes, it is going to shift.
So you
It's
definitely-
not happening. It's not happening the following
Let me tell you,
day.
that calendar with the big X on all the days.
So there's gonna be 150 of them.
Hey.
At our next meeting. We're gonna have to-
For the year, we're gonna do 365 licenses.
The sword of Damocles is going to hang above somebody else's head. I will accept a motion to approve the consent items. Seconded?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Mona said there was only one. I didn't think it was worth it for
They
one.
came
but
in this
For
afternoon.
150, it's definitely worth it. That's the payback from my first meeting. by the way.
Exactly, yeah. You had 14 of them then.
It was like 50. It took me a half hour to get through.
Do we need to make a motion on to move to executive
Yes.
session?
Yeah, there is
Agenda?
there is a motion in your booklet for that.
Yes, on executive session. Motion for executive session, move the board enter into executive session under exemption 3, collective bargaining strategy regarding the laborers union. Further, as chairman, I declare that an open meeting discussion will have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the town, and we require a roll call vote to move to the session. Ms. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Springer?
Yes.
Mr. Jeffries? Yes. So do we adjourn this meeting?
So wasn't it not to return to open? Is that part of it or not?
Actually, the chairman should state that you're only returning to open session just to adjourn.
We're going to only return to open session.
Session just to adjourn.
to adjourn. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.